Okay, so we're very pleased to have with us Professor Jan Boersema today from Holland, who's actually here for 6 months in Cambridge as a visiting fellow here at St Edmunds College, also of course visiting with us in the Faraday Institute. Professor Boersema is from the Free University in Amsterdam. He told me that all of his introduction is up there on that slide, some of it's in Dutch, so I won't try and get my Dutch pronunciation right. But until recently he was the director of the Blaise Pascal Institute there, and he's now based at the Institute for Environmental Studies at the Free University. He's also very active, has been very active in advising the Dutch government in various environmental concerns, and is also the editor of the journal Environmental Sciences. So very broad experience and interaction with the world of the environmental concern and writing and publishing. In fact, his book here is, he's writing at the moment, am I allowed to say this, is going to be on Easter Island. I don't know what he's doing here in Cambridge when he could be sitting there writing his book on Easter Island, but he has been there. And it's going to be on the sort of ecological collapse of Easter Island and the whole rather controversial discussion surrounding that particular paradigm. So I think it'll be a very interesting book when it comes out. But today he's going to speak to us on sustainable development, is religion relevant? Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Dennis, for giving me the opportunity to address such a distinguished audience today. This is on the menu. It's quite a lot, so I will speed up. First, a little on the need and nature of sustainable development, and then on the concept of development as such and progress and the relation with growth, and then on Christianity, Western civilization and progress, and then the burden of progress and the benefits. And then we turn to something else, real progress or green progress, and abandoning GDP. And in the end we return to Christianity and in general to religion. And I draw largely on the books of the authors mentioned below at the bottom. So first, the need for sustainable development. Shortly. Here you see the footprint in the red line, and it's going up, and in 85 it's passing 1.0, so meaning that at that point we were using more Earth than Earth is providing to us. So that's clearly a sign of humanity behaving in an unsustainable way. And there's a lot of discussion about what is the biggest problem at the moment. I think it might be climate change, but I focus to another major problem, the decline of species and the loss of biodiversity. And as you can see, the loss of biodiversity the decline was well before the exponential growth of humanity. So we were quite capable with quite a few to drive some species to extinction. And what is the greatest concern to me is the pace of the decline. So it's not just a decline, because evolution is also about extinction, but it's the pace of the decline that is at the moment between 1,000 and 10,000 times the baseline, what is normal. And the reason for the decline is also a concern and a worry, because it's by and large human induced. We are the ones that expel our fellow creatures from the earth. So what we need is a different kind of development, sustainable development, as it is called by the UN committee headed by Brundtland. And somehow the term sustainable development is a compromise. It's a compromise between sustainability, the idea of some balance between us and nature that can be sustained and has a durability, and the idea of development, which is inherently an idea of change and also growth. But to me, development is a positive thing. At the moment the term was coined, sustainable development, there was a large discussion about that it is controversial, it's opposite. Sustainability is opposite to the idea of growth. You can't have sustainability at the same time growth. And we will see if it holds water, that idea. And I think the first comment I would like to make is that the economists have somehow hijacked the idea of progress and narrowed it down to an idea of economic growth. But as such, the idea of progress, I think, is a great idea. And it says that civilization has advanced in the past, is now advancing, and all likelihood will continue to advance in some ways. That is the idea. And what I'm arguing is that idea is, in fact, not just an idea of the Enlightenment. I think it's older, far older, and it's also a Christian idea. And it's also an idea that's central to Western civilization. I think the whole idea of progress is built on a linear concept of history, the era of time, and growth is built on the idea of progress, of advancement. Our culture is also anthropocentric. We see nature as a commodity, and we are materialistic. It's matter-based. I think that needs no explanation. So I will turn to the idea of progress in the origin of the idea. You can find very clear traces of the idea in the Greek philosophy. I've highlighted some of the fragments and the ideas and even the terms that are pertinent to this. And you can see there is an idea of growth, which is very much the core thinking of Aristotle. And there's also the idea of gradually advancing in Lucretius' Vera Natura. And in the Bible, I think there's the idea of a sacred history. God is the God of history. There was a beginning, and God is present among his people, and there will be an end. So there's an eschatology. And those two ideas in history, I think, are fused by St. Augustine, who was very clear about the history of the universe being rectilinear. It's not repetition, but it's succeeding one another in a regular connection, and there's a one-dimensional movement in time. This is clearly the idea of the arrow of time. And there's also the saying that the wicked walk in a circle, so they don't make progress at all. That idea was almost forgotten, I think, in the Middle Ages, the idea of progress. But it was reborn and reinforced in the Renaissance and the Reformation, and certainly in the Enlightenment, as you know. And that it got also its moral undertones, the moral progress that even humanity as such could make progress and be better human beings. Francis Bacon linked the idea of progress to science. And lack of hope is the greatest obstacle to the progress of science. So what we are aiming at is the progress of science. And the progress of science, that was also an idea of the Reformation, is linked to the idea of God's works, the book of nature. I think that's Harrison's idea. So here again, the progress is returning. And then the last figure, quite a figure, a famous figure, also saying that if he was able to see further, it was only because he stood on the shoulders of giants. So that is the idea of incremental building up on your forebears. And then the idea is formulated by Bill Clinton in its, full scale, saying that if you have an arrow of time, if you have a past, a present, and a future, and the future can be better than the past, and each individual has a personal moral obligation to make it so. And I think that is, in one sentence, the dynamic, progress-oriented attitude of the West, I think. It's still available, the citation of Isaac Newton, without giving the credits to Isaac Newton, so we shouldn't do that. So, we make progress in our outline. We're almost halfway. So the idea is inextricably bound to West, and what are the benefits and the burdens, drawbacks. I'll start with the benefits. I think the whole idea of progress has been tremendously successful in our Western civilization. It's inconceivable, the situation 2 ages back with the situation nowadays. We have seen soaring our real income, the life expectancy by decades, the dailies, the disability adjusted life years. We almost now live 60 years without serious illness. The literacy has soared, equality, human rights, women's rights, not to forget, and educational rates, and plummeting infant mortality, hours work, food prices, pollution of air, water, soil in the developing world, developed worlds, after the 70s. So, in short, this is a tremendous result, and we should be grateful for this, and not take it for granted, as some of the young students do, as if it was the normal situation. But it came at a price. And it's quite obvious that progress is made at the expense of nature. You need to cut down the tree to build a house, for instance, to say it shortly. But we see also in our culture the idea that conquering nature as such is progress. And I think that is a more dangerous idea, and I will elaborate a little on this. In his wonderful book, Keith Thomas, A Man in the Nature World, it's about changing attitudes in England. On page 25 it says, human civilization indeed was virtually synonymous with the conquest of nature. So that's more or less his conclusion. And there's a vast literature on this. We're not surprised to find a book on Mao's wars against nature, but you can also find some nice books written on the situation in England, Taming the Flood. It's in this area, the fence and so on. And there's a book on Germany, and there's a nice book on the destruction of the bison. First, Germany. Here you see Johann Gottfried Tulla, and he is the man who tamed the Rhine. So it was the idea that the Rhine needs some kind of correction, perfection of nature, and Tulla was the man who did that. He shortened the Rhine by 175 kilometers, which was devastating the whole ecosystem. And the idea was that the Rhine is like a serpent crawling through the German landscape. So there is an inherent evil in that behavior of the Rhine. It should be corrected. That was the idea. And the same idea is taming the wild is a kind of civilization, domesticating the wild, domesticating chaos, domesticating the savages. And almost inevitably it goes in tandem with taming the people of the wild. So the natives, the savages, and the Indians. So taming the flood necessitated taming the people of the floodlands. It's about England. And here how the West was won, you see the goddess, the progress, is accompanying the great trek to the West. The North American bison ideology. The bison was seen as an odd animal. It should be domesticated. And there was an attempt to domesticate it in the James River, but it failed. And then they came to see the buffalo as an obstacle to the establishment of the European way of life. It should be replaced by decent European cows. And the savage life does not belong to the orderly civilized world, so it allows hunting to extinction, replacing, alteration of habitat. And again, killing the buffalo was part of the fight against the Indian, which also was in a sense untamable and hard to domesticate. It was quite successful. They drove the bison nearly to extinction. And here you see a dreadful picture of all, I think, about 1 million bison skulls. I'm not sure. Someone at the top. And around 1900 there were about 1,000 bisons left. And then came the aftermath. The idea that what we must do is gather them all into a small district where we can really police and protect them and teach them the arts of civilized life. That was a New York Times editorial of 1870. It was said, of course, about the Native Americans, but again, it goes in tandem with the bison, and as a nature reserve was established, the first, by the way, the first one in the world, in 1872, and a herd of bisons were placed in that reserve, 2,000 meters above sea level, which is not their natural habitat. But it looks like a pristine nature. So, there's reason to criticize the idea, and that was done in the 20th century. Of course, we had several crises in the 20th century, the world wars and the environmental crisis. So there was a lot to criticize, and also the idea of progress was criticized. So the question arises, why still growth? Why are we so optimistic again about a man who has progress on his in his appearance? I think there are two reasons for it. First, there is still a reason for poverty abatement, not in our world, but in large parts of the world. So there's every reason to abate the poverty and to try to raise the livelihoods of those people. But there's also a second reason for it I want to highlight, and that's about the idea of sustainability. If we want to have a kind of sustainability in our world, I think it needs to be along this nice formula, this equation, the famous equation of Ehrlich and Holdren, coined in 1971, which says that the impact on the environment is more or less equivalent to the population, the number of people, the affluence, so the amount of products and services per capita, and the technology, which is the impact per product of service. And it's a kind of an analytical formula. It just says I is I in the end, if you divide it all. So it's an analytical formula to see what is important to this. And of course, we can't have a real sustainability with a growing, ever-growing number of people on Earth. So we have to arrive at the certain balance. Most countries have to arrive at that by going through a so-called demographic transition. The death rate going down earlier than the birth rates, which creates an enormous rate in the natural and an increase of the amount of people on Earth. So, and what are good indicators for bringing back the birth rate? The most important reason is increasing of the affluence. There's a clear indication that we can see a reverse relationship between the increase of GDP or GNP, how we measured it, and the amount of children that are on average in a country raised. So we have to increase the A to arrive at a stable P. And the only way to avoid a disaster is by decreasing enormously the impact of the a certain amount of affluence, and that is by increasing the technology. So we need some kind of progress in the sense of technology to arrive at a stable situation and to achieve sustainability. So, and that needs better technology, right? Maybe also a different system, different prices, different behavior of people, different mode of transport. All the examples are ready. Bio, diesel, electric cars, and so on. But there's more. There's also reasoning within the economic domain about what is ultimately the goal, what is our yardstick for progress. Should it be GDP, as the modern economic policy says, or should it be some other measure? Say, for instance, the pursuit of happiness, taken from the Declaration of Independence as a steering indicator. One might argue there is a clear relationship between the two. And of course there is. The vertical axis measures the amount of happiness. It's a kind of the mean percentage of happy and satisfied with life as a whole. So it's a kind of holistic measure of well-being for persons, and it's repeatedly researched and by large surveys, the World Value Survey. So it's quite a consistent measure. And horizontally you see the GNP per capita, so that's the amount of money available for each average person in the country. And you see there is a clear, the line is bending, and I'm drawing not quite a horizontal line, but after around 15,000 US dollars of 95, it is almost a horizontal line. So there is then an increase in the amount of GNP per capita, but no increase in happiness. So it doesn't make sense from an economic point of view, if happiness is your measure, to increase the GNP anymore. This is the situation of the United States, and in 46 they already arrived at the level of, on average, above 15,000, and you can see that afterwards, in the last decades, 2.5 times their income was raised, and the happiness line is completely flat. So they become richer and richer and richer, and it doesn't add a single unit to their happiness. So there is reason for redirection and for a different measure. And that is not an environmentalist talk anymore. This is taken from an editorial of Nature, 18 February 2000. So it's brand new. And it says, it is time to abandon GDP as the overriding measure of social development and economic health. So, because it's flawed, it invites for over-exploitation, because that adds to the GDP. And it makes no distinction between productive investment and profligate waste. And it's not, it's discounting the future in a sense. So it is time to look for something else. And the emerging concepts are ecological economics, evolutionary economics, industrial ecology, green GDP. It's all more or less the same idea about a different type of measuring progress by taking all kind of effects in account. But there's more to the graph. Here I've drawn a line around the historically Protestant societies, and also a line around the former communist societies. And what you see from this picture is that all historically Protestant societies are rich and happy. There's no single historically Protestant society, I'm a bit careful about the term, that is not rich and not happy. On the other side, there are a lot of former communist societies that are poor and also unhappy. So there's more than just income. It pays to raise poverty, to try to get the average income above 15,000, but there's more in raising income. There's also maybe the idea of democracy or whatever. Look at East Germany, it's very interesting. These are figures from 95. The wall was down in 89. And from that on, East Germany was moving to its former home, so to speak. So East Germany is moving in that direction. And what it means to East Germany is illustrated by this graph. There was a difference between the expectations, the life expectations of the East and the Westerns of about 3 to 4 years, and within a couple of years, a decade, it's now the same. So the former East citizens became like Westerners. They got an extra 3 years to live. The men are not right there, but they're making progress as well. And this cannot be explained by just improving health system or whatever. It is also a cultural factor. So, very interesting. So we have to look beyond GDP. And then we got the cross-national happiness of Bhutan in 72. The great fourth king, Yigme Wangchuck, was the inventor of the idea of happiness. He was quite an enlightened person. There was the Index of Sustainable Economic Welfare by David Cobb, and then the idea of the Human Development Index of a Pakistan fellow, unexpected, great idea. And now we have the official Stiglitz report in 2009, commissioned by the French on the measurement of economic performance and social progress, and they arrive at quite a different approach, and they think beyond, really beyond GDP. I brought with me a copy of the Stiglitz, so if you want to see it, can't go into details now. So it's seriously debated at the moment. So again, Bhutan, an interesting example. What can we learn from Bhutan? Bhutan is right there. So extremely poor, extremely happy. Really an outlier. Why is it so poor? Because it has a kind of subsistence economy which doesn't count in the normal statistics. So in fact, Bhutan is richer than appears on this scale. But anyway, it is rather a poor country. Stunning beauty, I think. Not only nature but also culture, the buildings and so on. Everything is really beautiful. Even the utility buildings are colourful and nice to see. Is the cross-national happiness index really a matter that is discussed in Bhutan? I've asked that several times, and here you see the national treat of Bhutan. It's called Doma. It's a betel nut in a leaf and some lime, and people chew on it and get a red mouth as a result of this. And normally it's sold for very little money and wrapped in a piece of paper, and then they take it away. And when I took a photograph and I later looked at it more clearly, the paper of April 4th, 2009 has a whole section on cross-national happiness in it. So it is really a matter of a daily newspaper, and it is taught at schools in classes. So it is really something. And in essential, it is about linking the cultural, religious traditions of Bhutan to the economic parameters and keeping them in balance. It's not an exact measuring of both, but it is a constant awareness of both parameters. you see happy people. Yeah, it's keen. It's compared to India, it's an amazing difference. But you may raise questions about the socio-economic situation. At the remote parts, I think the work is hard, the labor is hard at the field, and the equipment is, I think, well behind. So Bhutan is a complicated question, and it's also very. They only opened the borders in 2000, so it's very restricted. We weren't allowed to do the international world survey in Bhutan before 2000. So again, and now I turn to religion and worldviews. What is it that the Protestant countries are so rich and so happy, and others less well off? Has that to do with the religion? If you look at the literature, the journals of sustainability, religion is almost non-existent. It's not a serial issue to be debated in environmental circles as relevant for the cause of sustainability. And at the same time, our world is full of faith. Even the atheist, according to Science, there's a review of Dawkins' book, can be viewed somehow as a religion or worldview, speaking the same language. So the world is full of faith, and still it is lacking. This is, as far as I know, the first attempt to incorporate the idea of worldviews into a serious and environmental debate. It's the Sustainability Outlook of the Dutch government, published in 2005, and they developed some kind of scenarios, and they called it scenarios for worldviews, and it are worldviews. There's an axis of globalization and orientation towards globalization and to regionalization, and there's an axis solidarity versus efficiency, the market. And that builds 4 quadrants, and these are the names, the events, the books that are typifying the worldview within each of those quadrants. And the National Assessment Agency was able to show that it really makes a difference what kind of worldview you have when you go to the measurements, the instruments, and the actual policy. And they even made some models in which it showed clear difference in the outcome of the energy policy based on each of these worldviews. Also the food situation in the world. And the upper right quadrant is by far the best one in every sense. So, but again, one might say, is this really a worldview? What has it to do with religion? So now I turn to religion in the last 10 minutes of talk. And when we look at the world of today, the religious landscape is rather complicated. It's not just the simple denominations I have shown that add to 85% of religious people having some kind of denomination, but it's also that the kind of religion is changing. And there's a British sociologist, Colin Campbell, has written a nice book on the Easternization of the West. And in that book he highlights the idea that somehow the West is changing their own beliefs in a more in a way that that has something in similar with the situation in the East, the religions in the East. Campbell told me that the first title of the book was The De-Westernization of the West, but the publisher wanted to have it the Easternization of the West. So it is a movement from within in which the religious belief are changing. And now we have in every British hamlet about 30 varieties of yoga on offer. Things like that is he describing. But also the sense of wholeness and the sense of unity that is within and outside the churches growing. And also what we call in Holland the somethingism. What do you believe in? What do you believe? I believe in something. So the somethingism is about a quarter of the people in Holland, according to a review. It is also at the same time a westernization of the East. So religion is globalizing, it's mixing up. It's a kind of bricolage. And I'm also inspired by the monumental works of Taylor. Sources of the Self, his first one and the second one, the Secular Age, 900 pages. So there's something to chew on. But he is delving in our own history of the West. And I think that's a very fruitful way to do, to see what we have lost on the way. My take is that in the end it is not about sustainability, it is about the quality of life. There will always something be that is sustained, that will last. Even if you have a society that collapses according to Jared Diamond, afterwards there's still a society which is in a miserable state, in a dire state, but so it is a decrease in quality. It might be a decrease in quality, but it's not disappearing altogether. What kind of measures we have for quality of life? I think subjective well-being might be one. That's a happiness index, and also a capabilities approach of Nussbaum and Sen is a powerful one. And they're all considered by the Stiglitz committee. And underneath are the ideas of the meaning of life and the good life. And that's, I think, in a sense, a rebirth of an old Greek idea and also an old a biblical idea about how to live a good life. What constitutes a good life? Is it matter-based? Is it based on material goods? Or are some other things important to it? And I think in this respect, religion has a lot to offer. And I'm not repeating what is in the books already, but I've read this one, Creation Crisis, and I can recommend it. It's very nice, but there's a lot in that book that is very valuable and makes clear that religion can contribute to several parts of the discussion. There are also a couple of books that are less critical, just repeating that every religion in a sense is green by cherry picking the sacred text, and it's always a greener religion than another religion. So I'll not repeat the literature, but I will give my own take and present my own views. I think what are the Christian virtues that might be of value for the environmental discussion, for sustainable development. I think the first one is humility, and I think there's every reason to be to put that in the first place because the history I have told you. So I don't like this kind of covers. Of course, it's nice that the churches are somehow joining the climate change movement, so to speak, or the people that are worried about the climate change. The church joins it, but I don't like the term crusade. So we have to be more modest in the debate, I think. And humility is also an antidote against the new environmental managers who want to make a complete reverse movement in another direction, but still in the driving seat, to blueprint for survival, blueprint for everything, blueprint for saving the earth. So I think it is a kind of hubris that is clearly visible right from the titles. So we've done wrong in the past, but now we are enlightened people, and we will steer in the good direction. I think that we need a more modest approach, a more precautionary approach to environmental issues. The other three are responsibility. I think that's a return of Clinton's idea of moral responsibility. It also points to our brains, to the rationale behind it, to using our ideas, our creativity. And I think we need that to develop technology and so on. And the third is love. What we need is love. I think we need to love our fellow creatures, because that's the only way to really pay attention to what's happening to them. There's no reasoning behind the care for other animals than just the love that God has for that creatures, and we can too have that love. And it also, responsibility and love links head and heart, and I think that's also a very Christian idea of virtue, to link head and heart. And the last one, I think, is hope. It's always optimistic. Christianity is always optimistic about the future.Maybe peaceful kingdom, very attractive painting in the middle of the 19th century. Where a little further on were bisons driven to extinction, and this painter is, painting a picture of a peaceful kingdom. So I like to end with some more tangible, practical ideas. Rethinking the good life, that's what we need to do. Rethinking the good life. And of course there are a lot of obvious things to do, like turning to non-fossil energy and so on. But I want to highlight a couple of other things. Our personal choices, just offering some ideas for consideration. What are we doing with our money? Just put it on the bank, or on the bank that is operating under fair and green constrictions. And stocks, where if we are all people here rather well-to-do, what are we doing with our money? Is our money working in the good direction? Even the money of our pensions, is it working in the good direction? A lot of money is working in the wrong direction, as we know. So it is an idea. As to our homes, are we up to a new kitchen every 5 years, or are we commissioning a painting of one of our beloved children or father or whatever? So bringing some color and art and music and sculpture into being. I think that's also a balance that has gone wrong in the past. Too much money is going to matter-based renovations, improving our life, and too less money is going to the things that really matter in a sense, like, for instance, art, which has a very low environmental impact. Food. Are we eating the right food in terms of quality and quantity? I think that's also something that we don't have as Christians, dietary laws, but I think it's time to rethink the new dietary laws. And I would offer the case of meat, I think, which is a good one. I think by reducing our meat consumption, we're making a really win-win situation. We are improving our own health, we are lowering the environmental impact, we are helping poor people as well. So we're better off in every direction, I think, by lowering the meat consumption in the rich West. And it could be done in a very sensible way. you don't have to resort to some vegetarianism or some aloof movement. You can be a flexitarian, as it is called. So choosing what you want to have and some quality. That's by the way not a new idea. The Progress Meatless Cookbook from 1911. But this is Jonathan Safran Foer, and it's an interesting book. And the last one is enjoy nature, enjoy creation. I think that's a good way to value nature by yourself. That is the St. Edmund's nature out of my window. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed, Jan. Well, I'm sure that's stimulated lots of questions, so it's over to you now for question time. So, please.
So I start saying I'm a journalist, so you may not like my question. I can tell you, starting from the last thing you said, it's often somebody writes a nice article and the title is made by somebody else, and the titles always want to catch attention and often say even not the opposite, sometimes even the opposite to what you say. So
you're defending the crusade.
Well, no, I think the crusade is a word put because people want to catch attention. So it's maybe the article says the right things and maybe the scientists are doing the right things.
Yeah.
It's just the press who want to sell more papers or catch attention. So that has to be
You're
balanced.
absolutely right.
I think the word is not what was supposed to be. But anyway, I also wrote in the past about countries' happiness. You know, from every 2 years you have the declaration of which country is happier. So I wanted to know how you measure happiness. I mean, is it based on some question and you individually answer?
It is a long questionnaire, which basically asks the personal answers. How do you value your life compared to last year? How do you value your life compared to what it could be? How do you value your life overall?
So it's individual.
And that's it's strange. So because happiness can mean everything, it can be influenced by everything. And nevertheless, it's a very, very coherent and reliable measure over time.
Yeah, because my answer is that Protestant ethics tell you to be happy with what you have, usually.
Yeah, right. That's the critique. That's the critique of Nussbaum and Sen on the happiness. They say, even in a concentration camp, people were, in a sense, happy.
So, yeah.
And in the 19th century, the laborers haven't a clue about art and so on, but are still happy. So what you don't know, you can't value. So that's the critique of. So they have an idea of what is the characteristic of humanity, and what is man capable of. So there are lots of qualities.
So can I ask one more question?
Can we pass on? Sorry, because time's limited. I think a lot of people want to ask, but sorry, but we can carry on discussion afterwards, please. Yes, thank you. You had a question, yes. Yes.
That was such a quickie. As an artist, I was delighted you were pushing the fact that people might like to commission art. But the question I was going to ask was, could you put that slide up again about happiness and income, and see where India was? I couldn't find it. I thought that was an interesting one, but I couldn't see it.
India. India was on the left, halfway up.
I'm not sure India is not every. Yeah, I think. Yeah. There it is.
Yes.
So on average, poor, but there's a lot inequality within India. It is amazing. There's another thing to it, that if you there's a widespread between Moldova, Ukraine, and Ghana and Nigeria, which we don't consider as places we want to be. And what explains the difference between the two, I think, is simply the temperature. It's easier to be happy in your own country. You need less. I think that's Occam's razor in this case.
That explains a lot about Cambridge, doesn't it? Okay, other questions? Yes. You want to move the discussion on, please? Yes.
Well, I actually spent Christmas in Morocco, and I'd agree with you. It's a lot cheaper to eat yourself in these parts of the world, apart from anything else. Can I just focus on one issue particularly. You mentioned biofuels, I believe in a positive way, and yet even in the last week we've had Friends of the Earth declaring against them. There's more species at risk due to deforestation to grow biofuels. We've had riots, food riots, half-baked science at work here. In fact, the Darwin lecture on Friday, he showed the graph showing that the Earth's temperature peaked at least 10 years ago. We haven't got a global warming situation for the last decade, and surely it just shows how much it's all in God's hands and not really something for us to toy with.
Okay, let's stick to the biofuels first. I think you're completely right, but that applies to the so-called first generation, and all I want to say is we need further improvements. And I think the biofuels were not stimulated because of environmental reasons in the United States, but just to subsidize the farmers in another way, which is common practice in nearly every country, subsidizing the farmers. So that was the reason to create some huge biofuel market. But it can be approved in a second and third generation biofuels, and then it might be an option. But I'm not an advocate of biofuels. I was just mentioning it because it's on the pump. Yeah.
Did you want to comment on the second part of that question, which is on global warming in the last decade?
Yeah,
or perhaps Bob White would like to comment.
I think the evidence is pretty sure on the side of global warming, and some of the phenomena we see cannot be explained yet, or doesn't fit other phenomena. But what we've seen in the last 20 years, that all this kind of problems are problems that could be solved within the same framework of accepting the physics behind climate change. I think that's my view.
The Met Office just a few days ago issued a new analysis of global temperature, which shows that it's been the hottest decade in the history of human life ever.
Shows like crap.
So the last decade has been hot. It's no good looking on a year-to-year variation. The last decade is hot. So
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, another question.
Nature, by the way, nature is not lying. So if cold tits breed earlier by 2 weeks, they're not cheating on us.
Okay. Yes. Well, come over here, please. I have a question here. Thank you. Yes.
Yes, we've been talking about the difference between a sort of materialistic view and perspective versus something else which isn't materialistic. And we talked about religion, we talked about Bhutan, and it got me thinking that within religion itself there might be some kind of split between a materialistic versus a non-materialistic look. And I'm thinking about an exoteric versus an esoteric view, religious view, thinking about Bhutan. We have the Protestant work ethic, whereas in esoteric religions, in Sufism and in the Hindi religions and in other religions and within the esoteric mystical traditions in religion, they don't have this sort of materialistic view that perhaps mainstream, we would say a mainstream, might have. And I just wondered if within religion itself there was this very split that we're seeing within progress.
And the most extreme religion is Jainism. It's not stepping on even an ant or a piece of grass. But my point is there is a tension between being benign to nature, having a non-materialistic view, and achieving some kind of progress in the sense of real advancement, or more science, better health, better education, what everyone wants, basically, in our society. And I think everywhere, even in Bhutan, they want better education. They have quite good education, and equality is okay, and men, women, and so on. But as to religion, the Christianity is allowed, but only within buildings, not in the public domain. and a Muslim is to be a Muslim is not allowed. You're thrown into jail if you.
I just
a
went
Muslim
different
believer.
kinds
So
of Christians, different kinds of Muslims, even within the religion.
yeah,
Esoteric versus esoteric.
Sure,
outlooks, that
yeah.
kind of one.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm in favor of a religion that tries to get both aspects in balance. The love and the responsibility and the materialistic growth, advancement side, and the being benign to nature. I think it is very, very, very difficult. But I'm not in favor of some indigenous religion that is extremely benign to nature, but has no equality, no quality at all, in my view. I think we were idealizing and romanticizing that kind of religion. But if we really live for a week in such a society, I think we will flee.
Please, yes.
I like this diagram, which has one point for each country. But have you got some information about different societies in which you might have a measure of what proportion of people actually feel excluded from the good life within their society, their country, their whatever? Because I think that's something that we certainly need to take on board, whether we are an equal society that most people have got reasonable access to what is around, which might be the situation, for example, in Bhutan, where everybody feels that they've got the same opportunities and the same access to the resources, and places like, you might say, right at the opposite extreme, the United States, where there might be very rich and very poor. There might also be the same in our own country.
Yeah. There is a lot of statistics about all the factors contributing to the overall feeling of happiness. So those data are available, and then you get people married, not married, divorced, having some great loss in their life, not educated, well educated, and on average there's a remarkable less variation in the historically Protestant society. So there's no one really unhappy in that society. Not in great numbers. Of course, there are some people unhappy in some stage of their life, but on average it's not large numbers. But those data are available here, and it's interesting. This Prof is asking that kind of questions: what contributes really to the happiness? What are the factors?
Yes, can we have a question at the back, please?
Hello. I would like to say that this is a really good diagram that is not only show the relationship between happiness and economic situations, also show the cultural diversity, the variety in different parts of the world. Because if you think the places you circle together only show the modern political regions. But for China and India and other old civilizations, it's not only affected by the communism or capitalism, it's also a very strong historical power for thousands of years. And during the globalization, as you showed in before, we have the westernized East and the easternized West. And during the globalization, we are gradually losing the cultural diversity. We are trying to protect the biodiversity, but at the meantime, we forgot to protect the cultural diversity, like things I heard about, like Europeans send troops to Africa, try to change the local people's life, but actually it's also kind of a cultural invasion which destroy their traditional way of life and in place put on another, like a capitalized lifestyle. Also in China, because the happiness is not necessarily the good way of life or sustainable way of life. As we both all realized in the ancient Greek time, during the slavery system, also people can be happy, but it's not a good life on our sense. So there's a lot of way of define happiness and richness. Like people from Mozambique, they may be poor according to the capitalism standard, but they are satisfied with their lifestyles. So I think it's it's very interesting. We have to start to think about the diversity among the human society. And because also in Bhutan, it's famous for a high suicide rate, among 9 or 10%. I don't know if you realize that. And that is also non-explainable that even in such a country of cross-national happiness, there is such a high suicide rate. So
Such a
high suicide rate.
Okay, yeah.
Do you want to comment on that, the suicide rate on that
So-
business level or not?
It is a very difficult topic, and it relates to very statistically few people. So it is, for instance, Hungary is, in a sense, famous for its high suicide rates. Nobody knows why, precisely. So I think it's a great worry for a government or for societies and communities if the rates are going up. I think in the UK they are going down. But we're talking about large numbers of people that are judging their own lives. And I think that in a sense is a reliable measure. But then we have to, I think, again, go beyond the statistics of happiness. I agree. And it's not the whole message, happiness, so we have to go beyond it. And I endorse more or less the ideas behind the capability approach. So there are also objective measures. And for instance, in Bhutan, the average life expectancy is 66 years. So that's at least 20 years behind the industrialized world. So that's, I think, in a sense, a loss. If they are happy, they live 20 years.
Right, I'm
Yeah,
afraid
and
it's
yeah.
2 o'clock, so I'm going to have to wind it up because we do promise people that
Yeah.
we finish at 2. I know there's a lot more discussion and
Yeah.
questions we can have. Do stay and chat with Jan afterwards if you still have points you'd like to raise. I'm sure he'd be happy to do that. But for the time being, let's thank Professor Boersema for a very interesting talk. So,